Welcome back to another lesson from Soflex Math. Today we're going to be working on rounding decimals, and it's going to be very similar to the rounding of whole numbers that we did yesterday, but this one is going to be focused on the decimal place values. So if you followed along with yesterday's, it should be no problem for today. So we're going to kind of work through the same process. We're going to take our same number in blue, 6 and 518 thousandths. So we're going to use that number to round to the tenths, and then we'll start over and round to the hundredths, start over and round actually to the whole number ones, because you can round a decimal to the ones place value. And we'll kind of show you what that looks like. So same way we did yesterday. So we're going to start off by locating what is the tenths place value. In this case, it's a 5. And then we're going to still, just like yesterday, look to the place to the right. So in this case, we're going to be looking at 51. And just like yesterday, we're going to say, is 51 closer to 50? Or is it closer to 60? And in this case, I think we all know that 51 is closer to 50. So we're going to round it and follow the same rules as yesterday. Numbers to the left are going to stay the same, and any numbers to the right are going to turn into zeros. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So as you can see, the way it looks in yellow is 6 and 500 thousandths, or remember that any zeros after the last number in the decimal are placeholders, so we can actually simplify it as if we'd simplify a fraction. So when we look at that, 6.5 or 6 and 5 tenths is the exact same as 6 and 500 thousandths. So the more simplified or better answer would just be simply 6 and 5 tenths. So as we round these, you're going to notice that you're going to have the rounded answers ending in the place value rounding to. So for example, tenths is going to be ending in the tenths. As we do our hundredths next, it's going to end in the hundredths. And then the ones will actually just be one number, one whole number. So let's go back and take a look at the 6 and 518 thousandths and see which number is in the hundredths place. So hundredths place would be the 1. The number to the right is an 8. So we ask our question, is 18 closer to 10 or 20? Hopefully you come up with the answer of 20. Okay, so that took those two place values. We still have to include our 5. It is still a decimal value, and it still has to have the whole number of 6. So this time, 6 and 520 thousandths can also be written as 6 and 52 hundredths. Once again, the better answer ends in hundredths, round it to hundredths. Ends in tenths, round it to tenths. Okay, now let's take a look at what it looks like if we rounded this to the whole number. So this time, obviously the ones, or the whole number, is the 6. And it's okay, we can go right across that decimal when we're looking at these numbers. So when we look at the number 6 and 518,000, we can go right across to the 5. So we're looking at 6 and 5 tenths, and we could almost think of it as 65 for the moment, just for our brains to wrap around it. So 65, is that closer to 60 or 70? And we said if it's a tie, it rounds up. So it's actually going to round up to 70, or in this case, 7.0, or 7 0 tenths. So we're going to have to write our answer in that same manner. So we're going to go ahead and write it as 7 and 0 tenths. And we can fill in, like I said, all of those place values. So there's 1 for the wholes, and then there's 3 decimal place values. And the same thing, 3 decimal place values. But we can just write this simple form as just a big old 7. Because 7 and, we could put a million zeros after, it's still the same value as a 7, as a whole number. So I want to do one more example here just to kind of see how it looks, even if you have more whole numbers with it, just so we don't get confused. All right, one more example. So now we have a bigger whole number, 527, and then we have 3 decimal places as well. So 527 and 314 thousandths. So we're still going to go through the same process, but this time we're just going to have more numbers to the left to keep the same. And this time we're just going to write it in its most simplest form, so we don't have to add all those zeros in at the end. So when we look at our first number, same as the last example, we're going to go ahead and locate the tenths position and the number to the right, 31. 31 closer to 30 or 40? Well, 30. But remember, we're just going to kind of simplify it a little bit easier. We're not going to put all the zeros at the end. We're just going to write it as 527. So notice how all those whole numbers stay the same, and it ends in the place value we rounded to. So we rounded to tenths. Our answer is going to be tenths. So this whole number rounds to 527 and 3/10. Okay? So our hundredths, what I can actually do, just to prove a point, is I can already write all these numbers to the left of where we're rounding, because we know that we're going to be rounding to the hundredths. So in this case we have our 1 in the hundredths, okay, and then the 4 to the right. So 14 is also closer to 10 than 20. So all I have to add to this, remember we wrote all the other parts, we want it to end in the hundredths, so we have tenths, and then we just add a 1 here. And that 1 is the hundredths place. So hundredths, we're matching up perfectly. All right. Now, a little bit different here. So now we're going to look at how does this whole number and this big decimal round to a whole number, and more specifically the ones column. You could actually round it to the tens, but for this example, we're just going to round it to the ones position. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So let's take a look at the ones column, which is a whole number 7, and then we're going to look to the one to the right. So in this case, we're going to be looking at the number 73 is what we were thinking of it, even though it's 7 3/10. We're going to look at it as 73. That's closer to 70. So we're going to go ahead and write it as 70 would be here, but we don't need it. We don't need any of the decimals because we're ending in the ones. So we're going to end in the ones. So 527 and 314 thousandths rounds to the whole number 527. So it really follows the same idea. Just don't get confused just because you see a decimal point. You can round right across a decimal point, or you can round decimal place values the same way as you round the whole numbers, following those same simple rules. Except with the decimals, you don't have to add all the zeros at the end. You can just end at the place value that it says you should. Tenths, hundredths. You can go into thousands as well. So once again, leave questions in the comments. I'll be happy to answer those, and we're going to be moving on to some comparing whole numbers. Will be our next lesson. So we'll see you then, and thanks for watching Soflex Math.